Have you ever wondered about the hidden threads that bind the history of India and Great Britain together? Join us on a journey through time as we unravel the intricate tapestry of Britain's colonial legacy in India. But beware, what you're about to discover may challenge everything you thought you knew about the pages of their shared past. But why did the British policies during their rule in India have a lasting impact and influence the country's future? Join us as we delve into colonialism's economic, social and cultural consequences, gaining a deeper understanding of India's complex past and enduring impact on the present. And stick around to discover some shocking, lesser-known facts about their governance. Back in the 1700s, a total powerhouse ruled the economic roost, with a whopping 27% share of the world's economy. It was like the big boss, making Europe's economies look like small fries. They had it going on, with their top-notch textiles, shipping game, and some seriously impressive metalwork. The world couldn't get enough of India's goods, their fabrics, jewelry, pottery, you name it. Textiles, spices, precious stones, and other valuable commodities were exported from India to various parts of the world, generating wealth and prosperity. Surat, Madras, and Calcutta coastal cities were important commercial centers. Agriculture was the backbone of the economy, with the majority of the population engaged in farming. The fertile lands of the subcontinent produced a variety of crops, including rice, wheat, cotton, and spices. The craft industry flourished, with artisans producing exquisite textiles, metalwork, and other handicrafts. These goods were not only sold domestically but were also exported, contributing to India's economic vibrancy. Then enter the British. They didn't just roll in, they set up camp to cash in on India's goodies. Do you know how they got in on the action? By playing the Monopoly game like pros. They snatched up control of India's textiles, shut down export avenues, and cut the cord on the centuries-old trade connections. It was a crafty move, but a total disaster for India. Let's get a bit into the details of all this. In 1608, the EIC secured permission from the Mughal Emperor Jahangir to establish a trading factory in Surat, marking the beginning of the British presence in India. Over the following decades, the company established additional factories in coastal cities like Madras and Calcutta, gradually expanding its commercial influence. As the EIC's trade flourished, it began to exert increasing influence on Indian politics. The company's wealth and military power allowed it to intervene in local affairs, exploiting rivalries and power struggles among Indian rulers. The EIC's political involvement deepened in the 1750s during the Carnatic Wars, a series of conflicts between the French and British East India companies for dominance in India. The British emerged victorious, gaining a significant foothold in the subcontinent. The Battle of Buxar back in 1765 was a game-changer in India's history. The East India Company, flexing its muscles, squared off against the Nawab of Bengal, Shuja-ud-Daula, and his allies. And guess what? The company emerged as the victor, scoring the right to collect taxes in Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. Ultimately, they became the rulers in these territories with the power to run the show. Fast forward to 1773, when the British Parliament rolled out the Regulating Act. Sounds legit, right? This act aimed to rein in the East India Company's power in India. It brought in a Governor-General in Calcutta whose job was to keep an eye on the company's moves and deal with Indian rulers. Enter Warren Hastings, the guy who took over as Governor-General. From 1773 to 1785, he went full throttle. The British went about annexing lands, setting up puppet rulers and playing puppet masters in Indian politics. They were all about flexing their military muscles, swooping into local tiffs to show who was boss. But in the 19th century, the East India Company's reign got heavy. They started with this whole land revenue gig, making people cough up what they couldn't afford. Throw in some forced labor and a dash of deindustrialization, and guess what you've got? A whole lot of unhappy Indians. Meanwhile, in the background, Indians were starting to feel a different vibe. Western education sneaked in, social reforms crept up, and suddenly, the idea of being Indian meant something more. The Brits, well, they were like, out with the old, in with the new, trying to replace Indian values with Western ones. Yeah, that didn't sit well. English became the golden ticket for higher education, providing access to a treasure trove of knowledge. However, this came at a cost. The emphasis on English meant sidelining vernacular languages and literature, stifling the growth of regional cultures and identities. The imposition of a foreign language created a divide, leaving many Indians feeling alienated from their own heritage, detached from their roots. Through policies like Macaulay's Minute, the British education system pushed for Western-style education and English dominance, while Wood's Dispatch aimed at bringing order and the Hunter Commission tried to improve education. The overall impact was a tilt towards westernization and the dilution of Indian cultural richness. Fast forward again to 1857, when the Indian Rebellion started. Also known as the Sepoy Mutiny, Indian soldiers and regular people were done with the British rule and decided to shake things up. A massive rebellion across different parts of India gave the Brits quite a jolt. Though they eventually quashed the rebellion, it flipped the script on British rule. The East India Company got the boot, and the British government swooped in to run the show. Welcome, British Raj. Unlike previous conquerors who sought control over territories, the British aimed not to assimilate, but to exploit India's vast resources. Their arrival marked a turning point as they manipulated India's textile industry by imposing monopolistic controls, disrupting age-old trade networks, and decimating local craftsmanship. The calculated destruction of India's enterprises was carried out in a planned way. India's textile industry was broken when unfair policies and high taxes were implemented. The British government destroyed looms, messed up supply lines, and passed laws to stop local industries from growing. The British took over Indian trade and turned the country into an exporter of raw materials, while flooding the market with items made in Britain. By slowly draining India's wealth, the British put skilled artists and craftsmen into poverty and made millions of people work as farmers, breaking India's complex web of different economic activities. The railways were supposed to be a sign of British kindness, but they were made to help the colonial exploitation plan. The construction of railways was overseen with an eye on facilitating resource extraction. Costs for building every mile of train in India were way too high compared to other countries' standards. It was because British interests put making money ahead of the country's health. There were a lot of terrible famines in the Indian subcontinent, which made the terrible effects of British colonization very clear. As a result of their carelessness and lack of concern for the Indian people, the British made floods and crop failures worse by carelessly exporting grain from India, while also enforcing rules that made it hard for Indians to get food. The result was terrible. About 35 million people died in famines that could have been avoided and were made worse by colonial policies. This number is much higher than the number of deaths caused by Stalin or Mao's policies. Also, the British consistently put high taxes on the already poor farming population, collecting huge amounts of money that left farms broke. Indian farmers had to pay huge taxes that often topped what they made, which put them in a cycle of debt and losing their land. The British government showed they didn't care about the pain of Indians by using cruel ways to collect taxes, like torturing, jailing, and taking away people's land, which threw millions of people into terrible poverty. But even though it was brutally exploited, India showed amazing strength after being under British rule. After decades of struggle, India finally gained independence from British rule on August 5th, 1947. The country's partition into India and Pakistan, a result of religious tensions, led to mass migration and displacement, widespread violence, and loss of life. After getting its freedom, India started to heal itself by rebuilding industries that had been destroyed and encouraging economic growth. The end of British control in India resulted in dramatic shifts in the country's political and social structures. The government changed to a democratic one, and a constitution was written to protect people's liberties. Independence also brought in a time of economic prosperity and modernization. The Indian government enacted initiatives to boost manufacturing, improve transportation, and provide access to quality education. India also faced integrating numerous princely states into the newly formed union and addressing the deep-rooted social inequalities and economic disparities exacerbated by British rule. Now, India has emerged as a major economic power, with a thriving IT industry and a growing middle class. Still, colonial exploitation left deep marks on history, acting as a stark reminder of the terrible crimes committed against a civilization that was once thriving. What are your thoughts on British rule of India? Do let us know in the comments section below, and check out our channel for more such interesting videos.